I got a brief introduction at the beginning of the summer school, the summer camp. Let me introduce myself more fully. My name is Coach Garcia. You can go ahead and call me Coach or Coach Garcia. That'll be pretty good. I'm the head team policy coach over at the Club Veritas, which is in Orange, California. If you don't know where Orange is, just think Disneyland. Most people seem to know where that is. Yeah, see, showing love for Disneyland. There it is. You'll change your tune after the new Star Wars film. But at the end of the day, I'm teasing. I'm sure they'll do a great job. My background is primarily, I did 3.5 years of LD debate in high school. I did about 3.5 more years of team policy seated debate. I was under scholarship over at Cal State Fullerton. I qualified for the national debate tournament twice when I was young enough and good enough to compete. And after that, I did more years of college parley coaching than I care to recount to you. I've been the debate coach, team policy debate coach. We have another coach for LD, Coach Ludlam, does a great job. But I've been the team policy coach over at Veritas for, this is my 8th year starting now. So without going into the whole situation of how I got into this activity when I don't even have kids, that's a whole other topic for a different time. What I'd like to talk to you today is about the pros and cons of oil drilling. And I really just sort of want to get into the variety of advantages you can talk about, the variety of negative strats against oil drilling. Hopefully I'll come across some ideas you didn't think about, but I'll stop periodically for questions so we can really sort of flush out the debate here. But as far as oil drilling goes, I like to think of it as the pawn to king 4, or as the e4 move, if any of you know chess annotations there. It's just king's pawn out has so many variations. There are so many different directions you could take with that opening move in chess. I think oil drilling is very similar. It could get really complicated really quick, and no 2 oil drilling cases really need to be, 5 cases really need to be the same, because there's such variation in the amount of what you could pack in and what you could address. So let's start at the top. Oh, by the way, raise your hand if you do not have a copy of the thing. Okay, I'm out of copies, but if you want to get one, maybe someone wants to give up their copy and maybe look at their neighbors. I think people down there need them, so we'll sort of start a little airlift to the Berlin-like area over there that needs supplies. Where's Jonah Ortiz when I finally make a historical reference, right? He'd be so proud of me.
His partner's here and I'm proud of you.
Good, you make sure to tell him. Then tell him I said something about sandwiches. Anyway, let's go down the need.
Who made you the sandwiches?
Yeah, darn right. Okay, let's go down the sandwiches. Let's go down the need off the top here. When you're running affirmative and you start, or even if you're running, yeah, it's a bi-directional topic, so, welcome to STOA. So I guess you could argue that we need oil drilling on the negative if the affirmative decides to stop oil drilling in a certain area. So I just titled it need instead of titling it affirmative or negative, so we'll just call it need for now. But a few needs here. Number one is just industrial powers. The first world, or if you don't want to link to a critique, call it the developed world. Which I guess is still kind of critiquable now that I think about it. But it's what you would think about the industrialized nations. They need oil to make stuff, right? They need oil to manufacture goods, right? Things like plastics require oil, right? Machines require oil. Oil is used for gasoline. So it's super easy for you to make the argument that oil is just the lifeblood of economies. It's how we fund employment. It's how, even if you don't work for an oil company, you can be very confident that you maybe take a car or a bus or someplace like that to your job. And so if you get an oil price spike, if you can make the argument that your economy is just so shaky right now that an increase in the price of oil per barrel would go up like $10, $15 or whatever, and it would have drastic economic impacts, you could go for that argument. Most people, I think, would believe that argument. I'm not taking a position either way because I'm trying to be unbiased with the brief and everything. But I think that's an argument you could go for. It's pretty intuitive. Number two, the developing world is gobbling up so much oil for a few reasons. So countries like China, India, Brazil, they're just industrializing a lot more, right? I mean, you go to Walmart, you see, hey, this was made in not here. So I know that country. So yeah, they're making all these sorts of products. They need more oil for that. So at the end of the day, just the manufacturing industry is necessary. Additionally, just the fact that they're having rising populations. So they're gobbling up more resources in that regard. So it's a pretty easy sell. Another sort of advantage or need, something that's, I guess, where you want to argue you need more oil, would be energy independence. This argument is going to get really complicated with the numbers really fast. If you come up and you start arguing energy dependence, I think the other side has access to a couple of arguments. If you go to the Department of Energy, go to the U.S. Department of Energy website, they have a little subsection called How Dependent Are We on Foreign Oil? I'll say it again. How dependent are we on foreign oil? That's at the DOE. And, I can't really think of a much better source to cite for the sort of factual foundation for your debate round. But foreign oil makes up 40% of what the United States uses. So 60% of the oil we use comes from, domestic sources. Right? So right away, your argument that we're dependent on other nations for oil starts getting mitigated. So you want to be careful about whatever brink story you're making here. What's more, if you want to start playing like the Saudi Arabia card or the Iraq card or Middle Eastern instability scenario, you want to be aware that, okay, out of that 40%, like 29% of the 40% comes from Persian Gulf countries. And then you break it down even further by country. Like I think it was like 12% Saudi Arabia. No, 13% Saudi Arabia. And Venezuela, I know it's not a Gulf country, but like 9% from Venezuela or something. So once you start doing like all the math, like it seems like it's a very, very much smaller part of oil we get from foreign sources than the facts would really bear out. So I mean, if you want to play the boogeyman card, like go for it, I guess, and say, foreign oil, vote for me, sort of argument. But a team that knows the facts and has the cards to back them up is going to take your claim that we're dependent on foreign oil and whittle it down and really damage your significance. So, if I were you, and I want to claim foreign dependence on oil, I would make the argument that's called price shock. You can go ahead and write that down. Price shock. I would paint the picture that our use of foreign oil is really, how should I put this? Like our economy, I would start with the brink scenario that our economy is super shaky, right? That our economy is vulnerable. And that's the word you want to use, because vulnerable, don't say it's open, because that's not really threatening. You want to use threatening language when you're a debater. We're open to, no, we're vulnerable, right? Or we're exposed, or something that makes the judge feel kind of uncomfortable. We're vulnerable. I'm uncomfortable just saying it. Imagine how you feel. So, so we're vulnerable to like a price shock. Our economy, like now is the key time, and don't get a piece of evidence from 2012, because that's just, oh my gosh, bad brink evidence for the loss. Right, try to get something as close to the start time of the tournament as possible. Like last week, we have a piece of evidence from this economist. He says that we're vulnerable to a price shock. Anyway, that way you can make the argument, hey, listen, negative team, or hey, listen, judge, I know that the amount of dependence we have on foreign oil is quite low, but at the end of the day, we're vulnerable, we're shaky. So even a little bit of a market mix-up puts our economy in a precarious situation. So you could take that little bit of oil that we're dependent on with foreign governments and make it seem like a big linchpin sort of argument. Does that sort of make sense? It takes more work, but it's a safer argument to make. Instead of just, boogeyman, foreign oil, vote for me, sort of argument. Do you know how to do that? Okay. All right. We also need oil. It becomes a sort of elections argument, or at least a politics argument. And I know you cats in STOA, you cats, I guess I'm one of you after 7 years probably. But I know politics arguments aren't particularly persuasive in STOA debate. Maybe this is the year that changes. I don't know. But like I tell my debaters, just be ready with a series of arguments. And, maybe you'll get someone with the last name Winchell in the back of the room. And you say, Winchell, how politics dissat? Here we go. Someone that's an alumni, someone that's used to running more sophisticated, detailed arguments at the college level, they'll be open to it. So that's why it's a little throwaway point, but I didn't want to leave very many stones unturned. So number 4, like politicians are going to be really careful about increasing oil drilling, decreasing oil drilling. It may affect their constituency, their popularity, re-elections in the Senate, in the House, political capital. So just be aware that that's an out. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because, frankly, most of you will never run that sort of argument, but I want you to be aware of it in case, your mind goes to that sort of area. But There are a lot more common arguments I want to get to. I just want to throw that out. Number 5, I think, would be pretty nice to pull the trigger on if you're arguing pro-oil drilling, and that's increasing employment. I think that's an easier scenario to understand. All these other scenarios, they have like 3 different levels of brink and 2 different levels of internal link, and it's just a lot more complicated. And for the rate of speed, which most of you will be speaking at, you just want, hey, vote for me. We create 50,000 jobs. Win. And then you're done, right? And it's something a little more tangible. You just have to have the cards to back that up. So if I'm you guys and I'm debating and I want to run an oil drilling case, I just put out employment. Here's the cool thing, too. You get a sort of multiplier effect out of employment. So let's say you hire like 50,000 more rig workers, oil rig workers or whatever. Because they're making more money, that sort of trickles down into them spending more money. So if you're really savvy and you have the time for it, you could make the argument that our economy is on the brink of recession part 2, right? All the economic brink evidence and saying, we need economic stimulus now or else we're in dire consequences, all the hysterical evidence. And then you say, Judge, these 200,000 jobs pulls us back from the precipice, or it saves our economy. Something more sophisticated like that if you want to go down that route. Okay. I have a little bit here on how the oil is obtained, but quite frankly, I think I want to get to the where do we drill and the plans and the cons, because I think that's what you're here more instead of like, how do we find the oil and what sort of rig blew up in Deepwater Horizon sort of thing. We can talk about that if we have time. I do want to just talk about the compressed air gun. I think a potential case area, and actually I think someone wrote it or someone's planning on writing. I forget if it was a lab case or a staff case, but at the end of the day, the way we find these sorts of oil deposits in the ocean may be disruptive to marine life. So you may want to research that a little bit. It's called air gun compression or an air gun compressor. And you know how it is when you're looking for cases. Maybe it'll be something awesome, maybe it won't. Either way, I would cut a few cards on that, because there may be somebody that gets the idea of, I'm going to run it even if it's inherent. So let's get a couple of arguments there. Okay, let's talk about where these sorts of where this drilling occurs. I don't know if anyone's mentioned this in terms of jurisdiction, but first a word from our sponsor.
The disruptive to marine life, is that like reefs or is that like fish?
I guess it could be reefs. I don't think they really do. I don't think they explore a lot along those sort of reef areas, because that would be within the 3. I think most of the reefs would be in much more shallower waters than that. But wherever the evidence leads you would be my answer to my debaters. So they hate it when I say that. Just give us the answer. No, you suffer. You do evidence research, right? See, you're laughing, but like the Veritas kids are like, no, it's true. He stinks. All right. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. So where does this drilling occur? When I say 3 miles on here, it means nautical miles. So that's something I should have added to the notes. So just put capital N as in nautical, capital M as in miles, and as in Nancy. Watch, there's 2 Nancys. It's like, why are you picking on me? Anyway, it's 3 miles, nautical miles within the state borders. That's where the individual states have jurisdiction over that. So 3 nautical miles outside like the California coast or the Oregon coast or something, that's your state government's business. The federal jurisdiction doesn't start until beyond that. And that reaches as far out to 200 nautical miles. It's called the exclusive economic zone. The exclusive economic zone. Or the EEZ. E as in Eric, E as in Eric, Z as in zoo. Or as an exclusive economic zone. So that goes out pretty far. And yes.
Is ocean zoning going to change that?
Like, what do you mean? Like,
When there's cases out there to zone the ocean and stuff like that, and there's been talk about zoning the ocean. Would that change locations for like drilling and stuff?
I don't think so. I don't think you have to change like the mile recognition. I think that case just changes like the regulations of how the drilling occurs, or like where, like what the conditions for drilling. But I don't think the miles is the sort of thing. It's like within the miles, right? Because the 200 nautical miles is part of the Lost Treaty, the Law of the Sea Treaty. But at the end of the day, obviously we haven't ratified that, but we pretend we do sometimes, just for fun. And so it's part of that. So we're crazy like that.
What happens when they overlap?
Oh, they split the difference. They make it. They take like a sort of equidistant sort of calculation. Like for example, United States and Mexico. Now, of course, you need like a lot more treaties and signatories and stuff. So that might be something to look into if there's friction going on. That might be kind of fun to run as a case. But what they'll do is they'll just say, what's the midpoint? And okay. I mean, apart from that, you may want to investigate, because there's no dotted line on the ocean. There's no dotted line between California and Nevada or whatever. But, there's no dotted line floating in the ocean for you to have like a border. There are a couple of exceptions. Texas and Florida, 9 nautical miles. And this is just sort of a throwaway line. It was one of the articles I was doing to research this speech. Talked about how Louisiana has some funky exception for their jurisdiction. So like 9 nautical miles for Louisiana. Or not 9 miles, but they don't use regular nautical miles. They use Admiralty nautical miles. So I don't know. I could see like this total squirrel case that finds something wrong with that sort of inconsistent application. It would be an annoying case, but whatever. I'm cool with that. All right. I have the enforcement down as BOEM-RE, but I found some conflicting arguments here. I think you're safer. Most of the websites took me down to BOEM, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. There's a Doctor Who joke in there, but I'll let you guys insert that because I don't know who many people. The face of BOEM. Well, let's just move on. All right. Down to the plans. So some of the random things I was thinking of, some of them are pretty straight up. Like number 1, just increase the oil drilling. We need oil, let's go get it. The sort of drill, baby, drill philosophy. And logically, because it's bidirectional, if you find some instance of oil drilling in the status quo that needs to be shut down, maybe you'll have jurisdiction to do that. I'm not exactly sure how the leasing arrangements works. I don't know if the federal government can just come in and revoke a lease just all of a sudden in the middle of the lease. So if you're like stopping oil drilling where it's currently happening, you want to be really careful with that, because the federal government leases these plots to different companies for them to drill. I think an easier plan text to write, presuming you have a solvency advocate ideally, would be at the end of the day, just don't renew the lease. I think you're in probably safer waters. So many puns this year. You're in safer waters with that sort of idea. But increasing, just do it overall. Kind of a subset of that I would try is maybe just increase in a particular area. So maybe at the beginning of the year, you want to just run this huge monster case of like, drill everywhere, and just garner like so many huge case impacts that you would just outweigh any disad that you link to. And just say, oh, we kill the fish, but we create 13 trillion jobs. Sort of thing. Link your disads, we will outweigh. And that's voting issue number 1. We outweigh all the disads. Yeah, you're just like, yeah, link all the disads, right? So that sort of thing. And then later on in the year, once you get tired of linking to all the disads, maybe you just shrink it down to just a particular area of offshore drilling. Maybe ANWR, maybe something less predictable, like something like in Virginia or South Carolina or California. Southern California, something like that. So you still know all the oil drilling arguments, but at the end of the day, you're maybe not linking to everything. So it's not really a squirrel case, it's just a tinier case of a bigger oil drilling debate. So now the negatives, disads, don't link to you because they have generic links and you have a specific case. So you can get away saying, Judge, there's no specific link. They just say oil drilling. But all our cards say South Carolina offshore oil drilling is too legit to quit, so we don't link to the disad. See how it sort of functions? Plus, it might be fun because you get a reputation for being big oil drilling, then you're tiny oil drilling, and then they're looking at their box like, no, nothing links anymore. Maybe that's just me, whatever. Another sort of plan area is looking for better ways to clean up spills. Better ways to clean up spills. I think that at the end of the day, you can make a pretty good argument that these accidents are inevitable. They've happened so frequently in the past. So I think you're winning a little bit on the likelihood debate, like the risk is 100%, because it's happened in the past, and these things are, and your cross-X just becomes really easy. Are these things run by humans? Yes, they are. Oh, do humans make mistakes? Yes, they do. Ha-ha, trap. And you do that. And if they say, no, they're run by computers. Who programs these computers you speak of? Humans, yes. So and then you're doing okay. So either a better way to clean up spills technologically, or just using existing technology, maybe something kind of boring like just like restructuring, the emergency crews do. I think there could be plentiful ground there if you know where to look. Because there's always somebody with a new good idea. Liability law could be interesting because it gets a little messy when these oil spills happen as to who's liable, who's not, what court do you sue through, damages sort of things. So if you're willing for a slightly, maybe you want to risk a topicality debate, maybe you're feeling pretty good about your tea debate, and you're saying, well, we may be this might be an enforcement deal, or if you can try to say cleaning oil spills is part of managing our national resource policy. So I could see arguments for or against topicality there, but just be kind of interesting. And if you're looking to go into law school, liability law might be good to get some of the the legal lexicon out of the way now when you're younger, and just say, hey, what's a stare decisis? What's a precedent sort of thing. So. Number 5, drilling safety. Yeah. For drilling safety, you want to get a hold of the report that the United States government made after the Deepwater Horizon spill. They had recommendations in there. And it'd be nice to sort of pick and choose to see which recommendations have been followed, which recommendations have not been. Because anytime you have like experts endorsing a thing, but then the government does not do that thing, then you have an instant solvency advocate, you probably have some rationale, and it may be a little bit easier to start writing the case. So that could be pretty good too. I don't know, you only have 5 on yours, right? It only goes to 5? All right, I added a 6. I found something little new this morning. There's HR, House Resolution. It passed the House, but it'll get vetoed. So there's your inherency. It's HR 2231. This is a bill, like I said, it passed the House mostly along party lines. Senate won't pass it, and Obama will veto it for sure. But this wants to expand drilling, like sell more leases off the coasts of Virginia, South Carolina, Southern California, and Alaska. So if you're just willing to, if you don't want to think too hard about your plan text, just say, hey, look, these representatives already endorsed this plan. Let's just take the text out of the bill and slap it into the plan text and start reading all the advantages that all the representatives say will garner from the bill. So you just kind of live and die off the bill. It may not be as exciting as just finding like your own little niche argument, but it may not be exciting, but it's simpler. Okay. Anyway, so those are some of the ideas I brainstormed off the whole oil drilling game. I think you can see there's a variety of plans you could do, and then a variety of advantages you could claim based off of just oil drilling in general. Before we get to the cons, and this gets complicated, before we get to the cons, are there any questions? In my head, it was just, I saw someone in the back like, what's oil? Okay. Like, oh no, I don't know. Oil can. Okay, let's go to the cons. I run a lot of these impacts just off of oil spills in general. So I think there are a lot of different ways you can take it. And quite frankly, sometimes I get tired of there not being terminal impacts in STOA. So it might be nice to do that for in your second year of debate if you're not used to doing it. Once you argue that oil spills are inevitable, I think you get a lot of traction on this sort of a disadvantage. Because then again, your likelihood goes to nearly 100%. Once you say the word inevitable, and what are they going to say? There will never be an accident. I promise. Right? That's not going to fly. So once you get that 100% likelihood, the time frame, who knows? But once you get that 100% likelihood on your disad scenario, you can sort of just worry about the magnitude, about your disadvantages. Number 1 is ecological. I think that's pretty easy. Initially, you'll probably get a lot of pieces of evidence that just say ecological damage or environmental damage. For my taste, that's all right at the beginning of the year, like at a debate camp, when you're just getting used to the topic. But as you get further into the research, you might want to make your impact scenarios more sophisticated. Find a particular keystone species for a different geographical area, right? Like if something's damaging, like say, like the horseshoe crab, which sounds really obscure, but is necessary for us to generate smallpox vaccinations. Like we use that species for an important medical advancement. So if it's like a particular, and then you're kind of ready for like the small drilling squirrel cases too, because you have like the species of the region. Again, like Smeagol Gollum in my head, just going at it. So I think, at the end of the day, just try to be as specific as possible with the species that you're arguing for the impact. Does that make sense? Great. Because if you just say general species, the other side, reporting for duty, general species. If you just say general species impacts, I think what they're going to argue, the other side is going to argue at the end of the day, if I'm affirmative, I argue, well, we improve the economy, which means more money for species preservations and environmental work. So a specific species means maybe you kind of get out of some of those turn scenarios a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. Next is the fishing industry. Again, you look at the BP, the Deepwater Horizon accident, for the effects on fishing industry. That might be a nice counterbalance if the affirmative's all complete, like economic, you bounce back and you punch back with your own economic scenario. Number 3 would be tourism. Not every place where there's oil drilling is going to be a tourist paradise. I really can't think of any coastal area I wouldn't have. Well, I can now, but I don't want to say it because I might insult someone in the room. It's like, hey, my mama's from someplace. So I did that. Yeah, someplace. Who knows? No, I did that. Someone talked. I was out with friends, and someone was talking about used car salesmen. And they said, oh yeah, you don't sound like a used car salesman. I mean, that just sounds like just a jiving sort of person. And then I tried to put on my best game face, and I said, my dad was a used car salesman. I couldn't keep a straight face very long though, but it was for like 5 seconds. It was really funny for me. It's really what's important. Number 4, a sort of a trade-off disadvantage. You don't have to call it a trade-off disadvantage, but it's kind of in the name. That whenever you increase spending or investment, if you want to sound like the president, whenever you increase spending on particular oil drilling, then at the end of the day, there's a trade-off between spending on renewable technologies. Right? Now, that's going to be a very sophisticated argument. I don't know how. I think that's sort of an easy one to kind of beat back and say, why can't we walk and chew gum at the same time? Why can't we have private oil drilling companies drill for the oil and have other entities, do renewable energy research? But those cards exist, and they're out there, and if you really want to try to make a play for that, that's a potential disad. I think the impacts of that, if you just depend on which renewable tech you think is not getting a lot of funding. I'm making you aware of the argument. I'm not sure if I would do it because it sounds like a lot of cards for not a lot of payoff on the impact side. But one of your opponents may decide to go for it, so at least have answers for it if you're thinking of running a case like this. Fossil fuel use equals pollution just in general. The notion that when you have more oil, let's say a Wiley negative just says, oh yeah, their advantage 1 says that there's like a decrease in gasoline prices. And they'll just like agree with you for the sake of the link. Yeah, there's like less gasoline prices, which means more people drive, which means there's more air pollution. And maybe impact that out to asthma impacts or something. A greenhouse debate, I don't really think there's going to be a lot of, not with this judge pool. Your judge, I'm not disparaging the judge pool. I'm just explaining it to you in factual terms. You obviously adapt your arguments to the judge pool. Your judge pool tends to be very conservative politically, either Republican or Libertarian. Not 100%, but, you have to play the odds. So if I were you, I would not get into a global warming will kill us all sort of position. because it's not going to take a lot of force to push the judge away from that. A couple of cleverly, even some like global warming good, or some cleverly placed turns, some good skepticism cards, and you're doing a lot of work for for no guarantee of payoff. So if you want to go the greenhouse gas effect scenario, go for it. It's your speech, but I really wouldn't if I was you. If you're debating in the college system, where they tend to be more left wing, then yeah, you would go for that. I noticed I put the con. Another con is Michael T. Clare. That doesn't mean that he's a disadvantage. That does mean that if you're looking for someone that of like a sort of left-wing bent, I'm not necessarily endorsing him, but he's coming out with some books and some papers that are pretty recent. I think his latest book is The Race for What's Left. And it's like a year, maybe 6 months. The Race for What's Left. The Race for What's Left. He tends to be very left-wing, so don't be surprised when he goes off on a rail on that end. But he's very reliable, and he has some pretty good credentials behind his name. If you want to write indites now because of his left-wing proclivities, I guess you could start doing that as well. So if you want to find a lot of cards about why drilling for oil is bad, I can think of worse places to go to. I'm scheduled to go till 3:45, but we have about 8 or so minutes left. And I think how the oil obtained is, we can talk about that, but I want to take some questions if you have any sort of inklings you have, anything I've said that was kind of confusing, anything that needs definitions. There's no such thing as a stupid question. That's not true, but if it is, I'll keep it to myself and I'll put it on my blog. I'm like, you won't believe what this joker said, dude. He said, hey, is it true that oil comes from... whatever. Go on. No. Wow. If I did, would you read it?
No.
Yeah, that's why. Why would I have a blog then? Why would you want me to waste my time?
Yeah, second question, what is HR 2231? Because I Googled it, but it just came up as like, oh, this is in Congress, and it got passed through the House. But it didn't tell me what.
Oh, well, yeah, I don't know the formal name of the bill. The sponsors probably have some like cool sounding name, like the Bill for Energy Independence from the Foreigners or something, right? So, whatever it is. But that, I don't have a fancy title for it. But what it is, it's just expanding selling more leases off of Virginia, South Carolina, Southern California, and Alaska. So there's that. But I mean, any failed bill is probably a good place to start looking for easy cases, because you have built-in inherency. Why didn't it pass? Because Democrats. Right? And then you go, why didn't the Democrats like it? And because it's your judge pool, you'll say, because they're Democrats. So it's a good idea, because they do not has common sense. Yeah.
Do you know of any other species
HAZ has, yeah.
that have benefit, like the horseshoe crab? Is there any more that have like vaccine?
No, that's just one I ripped off from another professor. So, yeah. The horseshoe crab. Yeah, smallpox. The smallpox. If you get into a little smallpox debate, no pun intended, that could be kind of fun. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Yeah, I think for the submersibles, for like how is the oil obtained, in terms of like the different types of rigs, how they oil drill, you'll probably get a lot more literature on the semi-submersible number 4, just because that was involved in the Deepwater Horizon accident. So that's going to get a lot of, obviously, bad press, but that's going to get a lot of press. So anytime you look at any other investigation into safety regulations, just realize there are different ways of mining that sort of thing. So it's kind of like last year. If you did TP last year, there are different drones. When you say let's deploy the drones, and if it gets really deep really fast, like, well, what types of drones? What is the payload? What is the interceptor, right? So if you really want to get deep into it, we'll talk about this tomorrow too, with the different types of wind power and wave power. But if you really sort of like those kind of techie debates, and you just want to win debates because you know more about the specific technology than the other. I shouldn't say just because that's unfair. And it sounds snarky, and it doesn't mean to sound snarky. But if you want to win debates, partially because you just out knowledge the other side, because you know know about a variety of different oil drilling rigs, right? You like to get into the science and the engineering, then that's for you. If you get a case that's like, no, we need to reform, the submersible, not the semi-submersible, they're fine, sort of thing. And then you delink out of their generic cards, and that'll be pretty good. So, there you go. I feel like hopefully I wasn't going too fast, but if you have any questions, just let me know. Contact me on my blog. That'll be good. Okay. Thank you for your time.